on this week's Rockstar Superhero.
You never can know, I'm taking the go. I'm taking my sins, I'm taking the toll. It's all we can take, it's all we can take. Living on life, stronger and soiled. Algorithmic massive thing. Cyber-assisted empathy. Can't take anymore.
Well, hang on to your hats, because today I gotta meet a great weird guy, and now I get to share it with you. Barrett Holcomb is a super fun guy, a very talented musician, arranger, and sonic landscape producer who is on a surefire path to being what we would call a somebody. Barrett, more affectionately known as Jon of Mars, is a lover of all genres and has a deep musical vocabulary, especially when you consider how young he is. After our interview, he and I talked about favorite bands for another 70 minutes. Kind of regret not recording it, but hey, it was a great time, and I really got to know him, and what a cool cat. I'm just glad I get to introduce you to him today. Please enjoy this lightweight and weird chat with this young Spitfire, sure to end up as dinner conversations someday in the not-too-distant future. This is Jon of Mars, and you're listening to the super tasty, velvety smooth sonic stylings of Rockstar Superhero. Dig it, baby. What is this Jon of Mars thing? Because what I've been wanting to know as I did my research on you, is this an alter ego? Is this a band? Is this an idea? You know, is this a concept?
It's kind of a little bit of everything you just named. Like, it is an alter ego for me. Like, I am Jon of Mars in a way. Nice. But it's also was a really good way to incorporate a bunch of people that I know that do music into like this concept. And so now I can just change out like who does what on things. And it's still Jon of Mars and it's still me, but it is in itself just like an exploratory concept.
Yeah, cool. So it's like Pink Floyd without the confusion.
No, there's definitely confusion, but yeah.
Well, I love it. And by the way, people will have to excuse me. I'm still on the downside. Well, no, I should say I'm on the upside, away from the bottom of my cold, but I still have a residual cough. So if you're watching this and you see me frantically clicking away to mute myself, that is what's going on. I'm coughing. I'm hiding behind the mic and I'm coughing. So anyways, back on target here. So when I first heard the new single, it made me think of, and I mean this all in a very positive way. I want to make sure I'm framing this correctly. Well, because it might sound like it's a left-handed compliment and it's not supposed to. I'm a huge Devin Townsend fan.
Oh man.
And I love Ziltoid. And I love the concept of an alien coming to our galaxy because he's looking for the perfect cup of coffee. I love the insanity behind that. And I love the musical insanity of that entire series of albums, right? It's more than one album. And so when I saw this name, Jon of Mars, and I have to admit, I hadn't heard about you yet. And I'm grateful again for John Asher. The first thing it made me think was, okay, so is this kind of, Barrett's own take on the Ziltoid concept, or is this something less absurd? You know what I mean? Or what is it? And I know the COVID thing has a huge, implication of what this album, what this concept is about. So maybe fill us in on why Jon of Mars and why the alien.
Oh man, when you said Devin Townsend, like, you nailed it. I love Devin Townsend. I love Strapping Young Land. I love the Devin Townsend project and the band, all of everything he's done. It's amazing. Yeah. So he was a huge inspiration in that I play the guitar, I sing, and I am also insane and never stop working, never stop doing stuff. So in a way, yeah, that was a really, really big influence on it. And then also people like, I feel like Frank Zappa kind of had the same thing going on, right? Like, he was the Lizard King and he did all this weird, insane stuff, but to him it was totally normal. So, right. But if you talk to him, he's just this super intelligent, like, well-spoken dude, and you realize that, like, oh, like, he doesn't, like, that's a part of him that's being expressed. It's not all of him, but it's still there enough to be creative and to mold and to do different things with, which is the same thing with like Devin Townsend and like, I mean, like in the Guar, especially huge influence. I love those guys.
Yeah.
It's so cool. Like, I always loved the idea of having just a mask, or like having a fucking suit of armor and some fucking pauldrons, like anything.
Fake blood everywhere, buddy.
Yeah, exactly. Vomit and fake blood for everybody. So like that was also a huge influence on it. So yeah, when it came down to like writing everything, it was the middle of the pandemic, and there wasn't a lot going on, obviously, for other things. I do have other projects, but, you know, nothing was happening. I had a friend who was in the college that I'm in now at Berklee College of Music, and he was doing his like final project to graduate. And he's like, listen, man, I'm in for music production, but I don't really write a lot of music. Can you give me, you know, like anything you got, like help me out? And I was like, yeah, it's not a big deal. And that was Jordan Karg, who did all the production and the drums and everything.
Nice.
And I was like, okay, this is the hardest time that humanity's had collectively, probably in 100 years at least.
Yeah.
So there's no way I couldn't write about like all of the fucking batshit insanity that was going on around me. Like, it was insane to even like drive to work, because we were like an essential business or whatever. Like, to drive to work and there was nothing on the highway, it felt like I was in like I Am Legend. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
So
yeah. And the sky is very clear.
yeah.
No pollution
smog,
anywhere.
Nothing. Yeah, the water looks great.
Yeah.
So it was like, there's no way I can't try at least to encapsulate some of that. And what's the best way to do it? Like, I don't want to take aside anything political, because everybody was saying ridiculous stuff, and it was just like everyone was in a pissing contest with everybody else. And
they still are.
Yeah. I just didn't want to be a part of it. And I was like, okay, well, like, what if I had never been to Earth, and then you drop down during that? How confusing would that be? You know, like, how do you quantify that?
Yeah, that first impression would really suck.
God, oh man, I couldn't even imagine. Well, I mean, I can kind of imagine a little bit.
Sure.
So that was like the idea behind it, and like the impact and implications that the pandemic was going to have, and watching like people that I love turn into like repeat machines for things that they saw on the internet. Right.
So parroting ideas.
Yeah, and it just like it's people, the same people who told me when I was a kid, don't believe everything you see on the internet. It could be fake.
Right. Yeah, it's I mean, it is absurd, and I know I think most people observe this from the outside and say, "Oh, I see the insanity of this. I see this idea of meme culture, and thinking the meme, one, is correct and two, is worth repeating." but I don't know, man. Human nature says, I really want to be right. You know what I mean? And I'm looking culturally for my tribe. I'm looking for a group of people that agree with me, won't fight with me, and actually bolster my opinion. So if worst case scenario comes around, I've got a team of people that will fight with me for an opinion.
And that's the whole reason that we have evolved to where we're at with society, is the idea of like collective survivalism, you know?
Yeah.
And that's super duper interesting to think that those kind of instincts are still latent within us and within psyches. And then you see it manifested in like when people get stressed out during a world event and go to social media for it.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I think. Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. And it really brings up a lot of thoughts in my own head in regards to human nature overall, which is, do we ever really learn? I mean, for example, I'm 56, so I'm much older than you. And I think of myself, my own life experiences, that I'm just sort of coming out of my teen years now, right? Like this whole idea of youth wasted on the young. That's a concept. And the problem is, you know, you get into your 50s, your 60s, your 70s, your 80s, if you're living that long and you're seen as this wise figure, but the reality inside is you're still the same scared, numb 14-year-old that still wonders what life has yet to hold. It's a strange thing. Humans, we never really grow up or grow out. And so, I mean, I don't want to go down a crazy evolution thing, but I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't think we ever really get better. I think we just sort of make it through.
That's totally fair. I think that at the end of the day, life is a collection of circumstance and reaction. And that is, you know, you sometimes have pattern behaviors too that follow through. And you're right, at our core, like, we're still the same person that we were the first time we realized that like we might have to face hard things. And it's super difficult to navigate sometimes. And so I was never the kind of person that was like, I'm going to listen to somebody older than me just because they know what they're talking about. Right. I'd rather talk to everybody and get a little bit of perspective, you know? So.
Yeah. Well, but the thing is so I don't want to say throw you under the bus, but I'm going to go after an idea. But no, I think you'll appreciate. So I'm actually very similar to you. I don't want to, make you uncomfortable in that way, but I grew up, I was a young musician. I'm still a playing musician. I'm still a performer.
Hell yes.
But I was a young musician. It was really important to me that I learned as much as I could about everything. Theory, sight singing. I went to music schools, right? And I hung out with jazzers. I hung out with the Cats, right? This wasn't about what was popular. This was about what was technically superior. It was so important that I achieved a level of technical ability that really was unsurpassable, that I was at the top of my game, and I only surrounded myself with those people. You brought up Frank Zappa, who obviously has that mindset. We talked, in the beginning about Devin Townsend, who obviously has that mindset. You're going to Berkeley. These are not accidental choices. These are not, hey, we hope you'll come to our school sort of opportunities. These are, I want to be the best of the best of the best. And people like that are typically comfortable playing music for musicians. They're not necessarily interested in the big reach. They're interested in that tiny, minuscule, highly refined world. And so I'm curious, am I on the right path with you? Who are you?
Oh man, yes and no, because
okay.
Obviously you want to be who doesn't want to be the best at something? You know what I mean?
Sure.
There's always a certain level of hubris in everything we do.
Yeah.
But I woun't say that I'm I love Berkeley. It's awesome. I love my schooling. I love making music. I love getting better. I take lessons all the time from people, anytime I can, just because I like information and knowing. But it was never I want to be the best of the best, and I'm only going to talk to the best. And I just talk to everybody. I think that everyone has something to offer, even people who aren't very good, maybe necessarily at composition or playing or have technical skill. So it's really hard for me to be yes, that's it. Because you're right. Absolutely. There is that drive to do the best that I can do and make sure that what I'm putting out is quality at least. But I have found that if I let myself get too involved in that or too in my head about it, I turn into an asshole. I don't want
for sure.
So I gotta have some level of being a little humble,
Well, and nobody wants to play an entire tour where the only people in the audience are the other bands.
Oh boy, yeah.
Which happens to all of us. There's nothing worse. I get it. It's great that they're there to support me, but the reality is, and this is how this is going to come off such a jerk, but to me, I can't stand when people I love show up at something I'm doing and say they're there to support me. I hate it. I frickin' hate it. You know what support is, dude? Bringing 50 other people. That's support. Don't show up and take a seat, especially if my show is free. You know what I mean? Do not take a seat. You're not. I don't need you there to give me the golf clap.
No Dumbledore claps here.
Yeah.
No, I get that absolutely. And it's cool that they show up. No one's ever going to be fuck you for coming to my gig.
Well, sure, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, it might be why don't you bring more people to my gig? For sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Bring in new people, show everybody. I tell people tell your grandma, tell your grandma's friends, tell their friends to tell their grandsons, tell their nephews. You know what I mean? That is the best way to get support, is to bring in new people and find new fans, because it goes back to that that your vibe is your tribe kind of deal, where it's
sure.
You can't even find your audience if you never put it out. And I feel so many people are so afraid to put anything out there because they're oh, what if it's bad? What if no one likes it? What if nobody gives a fuck and you find an audience and people enjoy it? Because people enjoy everything. Someone will love it no matter what you do.
Yeah. The reality of this, people listening, for God's sake, the reality of this is most people will not like what you do. Most people will not. They won't even kind of. They'll be cordial, but they will not like what you do. But that one person, the 1 in 100 thing, it's because it's typically the ratio. About 1 in 100 will say, oh, I like this. And then they'll tell the 1 in their 100, hey, you should check out Jon of Mars. And then all of a sudden there's 300-400 people out there because it's passed through 10,000 people to get to that refined audience that digs what Jon of Mars is creating. That's how you do it. So just stick to your guns, because if you're in the business to get famous or rich, you're going to put a gun in your mouth.
Yep. Every time. That's like
Every
even
time.
bands who are I'm sorry, I'm fumbling my own words today.
No, it's okay.
Notorious for like being kind of hoity-toity or like considered to be the best. Like look at Metallica. Everyone talks so much shit about Metallica because they're on top, and they've been on top forever. You know, maybe not arguably now. I think there are other bands that are getting to that level, but they for 40 fucking years were like, that's
the kings.
metal. That's it.
Yeah.
And they never started out to be those dudes.
No.
Like hear what you want and people talking and you know, the whole Dave Mustaine thing and all that shit. None of them started out doing that. They were just dudes in the California area that wanted to make music.
Yep.
Same with Korn and like so many other bands I can think of off the top of my head that just like, it's the same thing. And it's me and my friends. We want to make music and like we want to do stuff. So we're going to do it. So it's always been from that perspective for me. It's like never like, oh, I'm going to make billion, trillion, $1 million and have a fucking gold toilet. Not my scene.
Well, exactly. You know, you brought up Korn. It's a perfect example, man, because Brian Welch said the reason they made it was because Jonathan Davis's voice.
Yeah.
Now, as a musician with ears, and I know you know where I'm going here. If you're gonna tell me that Jonathan Davis's voice is a great voice, you are freaking high. That is his voice is technically sucks like so much ass. It's like one of the worst things ever. It's absolutely one of the worst things ever. It's not a good voice. He can't hold pitch. There's really nothing about it that's attractive, but it is so insanely effective. And then on top of that, when you add in the technical skill of being a front man, a performer, that changed everything. So Brian was correct that he is the right guy for Korn, and Korn would not exist without Jonathan Davis's voice. It couldn't. It just doesn't. It wouldn't make any sense.
Try to imagine literally anybody else singing Korn lyrics. It just doesn't fucking work.
No.
No, it could never work. Yeah, that's amazing to me. And that's a great example of somebody, they capitalized on what they knew was going to work. Like, you're right, technically speaking, Jonathan Davis's voice is not operatic. He doesn't hold pitch. It doesn't sound like it's going to be good until you hear the music underneath it. You're like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. Like, I couldn't imagine that voice over country. You know what I mean? It would never work. Never in a million years. And he scats. That's so fucking cool. Can we talk about that for a moment? I respect the shit out of that.
Oh, huge.
Yeah, and he plays bagpipes. Like, what the fuck?
And he actually plays the bagpipes well, too, by the way.
Excuse me. That I am under the weather myself today.
That's all right. It's all right.
Yeah. So, it's like I guess you can look back at almost every band and be like, that's the thing. That's like what made them. There's always like one distinct defining characteristic. And I think it's almost hard to find a band that like, you're like, everybody is what makes this sound. You know what I mean? Right. Well, okay. So then that leads to a very good question for us to chat on, which is what does set Jon of Mars apart? You know, like, is there something in your head? So I tend to talk a lot. I apologize, but my question is really more of a thought, which is there's a certain type of music that even though Devin Townsend is technically extraordinarily adept, right? He's a genius on all those musical levels. And he's actually one of the few. I hate that word because it tends to be overused, but Devin Townsend is literally a musical genius. That is for sure a genius. But there is a tongue planted so deeply in this sarcastic cheek of sort of musical mockery. Like, you don't make an album about an alien looking for a perfect cup of coffee through that musical lens, unless you're kind of whacked. So there's an insanity in there, and an actual insanity. So
when I take you, and I don't want to compare you to Devin Townsend, but I take you and I put you in that same cup of coffee, so to speak, where it's you and it's Richard Cheese. I don't know if you know who Richard Cheese is.
Yes, I do.
Okay, but it's that same. There's this brilliance, but it's bonkers. Like there's this madcap. There's a zaniness to it that is not. They're never saying, "Look at me go, I'm being crazy," but there is crazy in there. So. Is that okay that I'm putting you in the same genre of sort of like weird scientific crazy, the guy who's holding the beaker on stage while he's playing a 9-string?
Yeah, that's me. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, I enjoy doing the complex physics equations that I have to do for school, right? But then in the same token, like, I will weave fart jokes into my songs because it makes me laugh, or because I'm trying to make my drummer laugh, or doing a song on stage. You know what I mean? Like, that's not for anyone but me. So yeah, I would say that is the most accurate anyone has ever pinned me in my life, and I think that I am scared now.
Well, it's because when you get down to it, insanity recognizes insanity.
That's fair. I always, even when I was a kid, I think it was there. Like, I just didn't look at things the way other kids looked at things. I don't think I've ever looked at things the way most people look at them. Like, if you talk to most of the people I know, they will tell you that I will provide you with probably either the dumbest or the most unique answers to anything they could ask. I'm okay with that. And I'm okay with, like, the musical genius insanity, kind of insane doctor scientist who's suave as fuck and has a tank that can fly or some crazy shit. Like, right. I think of people like Mozart and Beethoven, and I think of people like Devin Townsend and Frank Zappa, and I think of people like Serge Tankian, even.
Absolutely. Like, brilliant. Truly brilliant.
There's a way that I think in expressing myself through this music that I have imprinted upon it my unique way of thinking. And I think that's what makes my music what it is, is that it is 100% like unfiltered thought from my brain. Yeah. And I guess the universe. When I was writing this album, I would like look at the song and be like, oh, I'm going to write a song about this. What tempo do I want it to be in? What do I want to fuse into that? And I would roll dice, and I'd let the universe decide, like, my meter and my tempo and, like, weird things like that. Like, who does that? That's insanity. I mean, a few musicians do it, but I'll open a book and find just, like, the first word that I see and write with that. Or sit outside until I hear a noise that I think is cool, and then see if I can analyze that in my mind and extrapolate some kind of groove pattern.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so it's interesting that you brought up the roll the dice thing. Are you familiar with Jon?
I don't think so.
Okay, so Jon is a Norwegian metal band that sadly gets compared to Meshuggah. Now, I say sadly, not because Meshuggah is a bad thing to be compared to, but they don't sound anything like Meshuggah. But it's because when you're dealing with mathematical music, it tends to be unclassifiable. Kind of where do things lie? Unless you're weirdos like us, right? and they wrote an incredible album. Highly recommend that you check it out. That came out last year. I actually don't remember the name of the album at the moment because I'm an idiot. I want to say it's Lacrimosa, but that's not correct. But there's a track called Cement. I highly recommend you check it out. Jon from Norway. The title is called Cement. There is no vocals. They're an instrumental sort of death groove math metal band. It is incredible. It's all in multimeter, mixed meter, odd. I mean, there's nothing normal about it. Nothing. They never, ever do anything but subdivide. It's all subdivisions all the time. And they'll use dice to say, where are we starting? And what are we playing over the top? So instead of taking a subdivision of like playing 5/2 or 7/4, because if most people take polymeter, polyrhythm, and they play it over common time, right? But they don't do that. They say, we're going to take bars of 7 and we're going to put bars of 14 Oh, excuse me, not bars of 14, because it's got to be odd meter, right? Something 15 or 3 over the top of something that is subdivided 7 times. So they're doing reverse Frank Zappa.
Holy shit.
And they're doing it in metal, and they're using tools and microphone stands and violins to play. So it's like they've taken all the crazy stuff from all the movies you've seen, Spinal Tap and everything else, and then they're making music by using their guitars against those things. It is bonkers, and it is so cool, and it is so heavy, and I'm begging you to check it out. You got to check it out.
I am absolutely going to look that up. That's awesome. I love, I can see though, I mean, like immediately touching back on them being compared to Meshuggah, the moment that you hear music and there is some kind of weird meter, Meshuggah themselves
like Meshuggah.
Yeah, even though they do stuff against 4, and they have openly said that they do common time stuff all the time.
Yeah.
What makes Meshuggah different? Because I've heard other bands that do kind of the same thing, like Animals as Leaders, for example.
Yeah.
I get a lot of comparison when I play that for my friends, like, oh, this sounds like that one crazy band you listen to. And I'm like, yeah, I could see how you'd say that, because it's like deeper tones, and they use, I guess you could call them like dotted 16th notes. Mm-hmm. Okay, or like a dotted quarter note, but I call them drag notes because if you think about when you're playing it, like I love Bleed and Obscene are 2 of my favorite songs to play from Meshuggah.
Yeah,
and they both have weird moments like that where it's like this just drawn out kind of note that disappears and immediately cuts back into these really, really tight grooves of like triplets in like 64th to 32nd notes or whatever. And Animals as Leaders kind of does that too, but I've heard other math bands that don't do that, but they use weird meters and odd timings, and people draw that connection all the time, and I'm like, well, okay, maybe, but is it the same style of groove? Because I think that's something that people don't really consider in those kinds of comparisons either. You know, like it can be in weird meters and against common time or not against common time and still have completely different groove and make you want to move in a completely different way. So super fascinating stuff. Is it, you said it was yawn, like Jon, or like?
No, as in to open your mouth and yawn. YAWN.
I'm typing that in my browser. So I can
yeah. You'll love it. And if you find the last album, it came out last year. I want to say in May. I've actually become friends with the band over the last few years and really, really love them. They're now a trio. They were a 5-piece, but they are a trio now.
Respect.
Yeah. I mean, dangerous music. Very, very, and again, they're doing it because they purely, they love what they're doing, and they know there's really zero commercial viability.
That's kind of where I'm at too. Like even in the Jon of Mars stuff, it sounds really good. Like production wise, Jordan does such a good fucking job. I don't think anything I do is ever going to sound that good. But in the writing, there's times where I used odd meters, and there's some riffs that I play, even though my guitar tone is kind of shitty, because at the time I had like a really basic amp setup, but I've upgraded to like using Pro Tools since I've been in college and doing like amp cabs and sims and stuff.
Right.
But they're there, and it's like, I don't know if people are going to like this. I don't know if people are going to groove to it, but it sounds cool, and it's really complicated to like things when you just switch up a riff on the dime and people have no idea. It's like a sucker punch, you know what I mean?
Right.
I fucking love that, and I wish that more people would do stuff like that, because I want to catch you off guard. I want to make you think about it. I want you to hear this music and be like, man, okay, that didn't happen the way that I thought it was going to. That's pretty cool. What else can I find? Where are the patterns? There's a mathematical equation and system to devise how a tree is going to grow its branches, right? Mm-hmm. I used those to help figure out like some of the patterns that I was going to do in the grooves for this album too. So like there's little bits of like, not the Fibonacci sequence because it's really overused, but some other like sequences and patterns and things like that. Like I look to nature, I look to the universe, like tell me how the music is going to sound. I hear it in my head, but I need to decipher it. So like, let's use these systems together and see what can happen. So there definitely is a level of insanity in what I do. Like who's going to do that?
For sure. But I mean, but the beauty of what you're doing is that's true, and you're pursuing it anyway. And I think that's really what's important. That's why I was fascinated. The idea of talking to you is really that you're, as young as you are, a very uncompromising artist, and that can't be trained. I guess what I'm curious to ask about is, you know, when you started playing music, you probably started fairly young, or at least as soon as you started, you became belligerent about it, right? And you're like, I've got to know everything about everything, because you don't end up at Berkeley without being a belligerent musician. You just don't. Right. There's no such thing. So how did you form? You know, like, where did it all begin for you?
I can remember being like 4 or 5 years old and just wanting to hit pans with like wooden spoons,
of course,
and make like riddle, like I can figure out that I can do patterns and kind of like repeat them, not realizing that like my dad would always play like Metallica and like Megadeth and really cool music around me. He's always into music, and not just those guys, like every kind of music you can imagine, he'll put it on. So I always was around music. Always kind of had this urge to play. Then my grandma Jane gave me my first guitar when I was like 7 years old.
Wow.
I had like a book that was like, right? I had a book that was like how to play the guitar basics, you know, that you get with every $100
right.
first
Got
guitar.
the bar chords and everything. Yeah.
And I played the hell out of it. And then I was like, wait a minute, all these songs that my dad plays all the time have guitar in them. I can probably learn how to play those too. So when I became old enough to like navigate the internet a little bit, I found ultimateguitar.com, which has been probably the #1 resource for me learning how to play. And I figured out things like Smoke on the Water. And I think my family cannot listen to that song anymore because I played it so many times for them. But then it was like, I hit this point where like, I didn't want to do everybody that I knew at that age, like all the other kids that were trying to learn how to play guitar, you know, the people who like learn one Bruce Springsteen song and then never play it again.
Right.
I didn't want to learn that stuff. I didn't want to learn classic rock, even though I love Jimi Hendrix. I have a poster of Randy Rhoads and Jimi Hendrix on my wall that I like. They're my dudes. But I don't want to like be that guy who shows up to parties and does that, you know? So I listened to metal music. I wanted to play metal music. I bothered the hell out of my parents to get me a guitar. I was doing bad in school because I was just like, I hated school. It's not that I wasn't smart or anything. I just hated the environment, you know?
Sure.
So they're like, if you can do good in school for like a year, we'll get you a guitar. And I did. And they got me a $149 Epiphone Special 2 that
I knew you were going to say it as Epiphone. I just knew it.
It's everybody's first, you know?
Yep.
That's one of the guitars I actually used to record this album. So I still have it. I still play it. It's old as hell now. I was like fucking 13 when I got it.
Yeah, that's great.
So that gave me the power to learn like Lamb of God and Megadeth songs. And that's when I really got into like, oh my God, there's so much technicality. And it was actually Mastodon was the first band that I heard when I heard Oblivion. Wow. And like that deep C tuning, like, oh my, that moved me. Like that made me get chills across my body. And I was like, holy shit, I had never felt that before. You know what I mean? I was like, this is awesome. So I looked up the band and what the album was about. And I was like, oh my God, this is like a super heartfelt message to Braun's sister. And like, there's all this really good music and things weaved into it. And they pick out these styles. And so the idea of a concept album was like imprinted upon me. I was like, this is fucking awesome. So I learned how to play like almost every song on the album. And I was like, my friends were all starting bands and I was like, I want to make like this. So I got into like a punk band because no one else could play anything close to it. So we're like, we'll do fucking 4-chord classic horrible garage punk. And we would play these shows. We would travel like 150 miles at the age of like 14 to go to Erie, PA or Pittsburgh and like play these shows with crowds of like full grown adults. And they'd be like, we were like, I was a big kid, you know, I'm a big dude now. And they'd be like, hey man, do you want to go to the bar with us after you're done? I can't, I'm only 15, you know?
Yes. Sorry. Oh my God. But it made me think of when I was young and I lived just at the time south of the border. And you know, I mean, I was going up to Canada all the time. And I was just old enough to kind of go out by myself without my parents. You know, I think I was 15, maybe 16. And my friend said, hey, let's go up to Kelowna over in British Columbia. And I thought, I wonder how I can drink. And so my friend said, well, if you put this necklace on, you'll look older. And the best part is not only did I get across the border, but I got in the bar and actually had a beer. I did. I think my mom knows about that. But now she definitely does. I did. I got in the bar, had a beer with Roger Peterson, my best friend, and then drove back across the border at night, took off the necklace and was like, wow, I look so old with this necklace on.
Yeah, man, that's amazing. I had like a full beard before I was even in ninth grade. Like I just one summer just it was like, you're a man now. My voice sounded like this, you know?
Wow.
So I'd go up to Erie and I'd play these shows, and people, obviously I drank. I was a bad kid. I was like, I would sneak out. My parents would ground me. I'd sneak out and go play.
You weren't a bad kid. You were a kid who just did what every kid does. And some of us get busted, some of us don't.
I never got busted, thank God. Yeah, I got lucky. A lot of my friends got in trouble and like stupid stuff, but I also didn't. I was never the kind of person, I'm still not now, to like drink and be destructive or anything like that or chaotic. You know, I would just have a good time. I'd have a few beers, play music with my friends, crash at some stranger's house, and then go home the next day. That was just, that's how it was. And that's how it was for us for a while. And then everyone graduated high school and moved away. So then it was like, I'm still here. I was still in school because they were all older than me. And so I had nobody to play music with when I got into like 9th, 10th grade. By that time, everyone was gone. There was no bands. The music scene died. So I sat in my room a lot, and I would just write music. And I would carry my acoustic guitar around in school, and I would play people like cover songs, obviously.
Sure.
And then like things that I would write and be like, does this sound good? You know, like test audience, you know? And there's still somewhere on the internet, those tracks somewhere. I don't know, buried deep, probably on MySpace or something like that.
Okay.
Which I think is like broken now.
Yeah. Hasn't played music in years. I've gone there every once in a while, and none of the players work. It's totally weird.
They had a server break, and I was like, no. When it happened, I was like, because I had thought, like, literally 6 months before it happened, I was like, I should probably get all that music off there. It might not be there one day, you know. The internet isn't necessarily permanent. Literally a week later, their server crashed, and it was the one that stored all those music files for millions of bands that like don't exist anymore. You can't hear anywhere else.
Yeah.
So I get through high school. I'm kind of just doing things on my own. Joined a band. Neuroticism is my other band. We had our first poster from our first flower show.
Nice.
And that was when it was like, oh, I'd never really given a shit about my performance aspect, and I'd never really given a shit about trying to make good or like super technical music. I was just writing music all the time. I didn't really
what you liked.
Yeah. And so it was really in that band, touring, doing stuff, that I think I formed the musician I am now, where like I know what I want to do, I know what I want to write, I know how to get there. It's no longer like this big process. It's just really easy for me now, and now I'm trying to I guess build an audience. So like my goal with music has been and always will be like twofold. The first is to inspire other people to play music, because music has been the most important thing in my life, all of my life. The second thing is like, you hear about how the music industry works, or how it used to work, and you hear about how people get screwed over all the time. So I'd like to do things a little bit more ethically and make sure that people are getting paid when they do stuff with me. Sure. And like exposure is there too, but that's not how you pay somebody, you know what I mean? Yeah. And to help my homies, you know, help my friends, like see their comeuppance too. Like I want them to be just as successful as I am. Like that's my dream. I know it's not necessarily possible, and you never know how things are going to turn out, but that would be my ultimate goal. And that's been since I was a kid, just to be like, make music with everybody. I will do music with anyone. I'll make any kind of music. I don't care. What I make for myself is what I put out right now. But if anyone wants to collaborate, like I'm open.
Yeah. No, it's awesome, man. So, okay. So the Jon of Mars thing, so you have an album that's actually coming out, I want to say in April next month, right? Is that
420? Yes, sir.
Okay. You know what? I didn't even notice that. I'm embarrassed.
It's all right.
But okay, so you've got the new album coming out. You have a single out, Respite, which is tons of fun. You know, do you do it all? Is it all you, and then you find session guys? You know, I mean, when I say doing it all, I'm talking about songwriting, arranging, that whole thing. Is it all on you, or do you actually have a team of musicians that you sort of bounce ideas off of?
It's kind of both, right? Like I think in both bands, I hate being the big head dude and being like, this is what we're gonna write, and this is how it's gonna sound.
Big head.
You know what I mean?
I get you though.
My bandmates are all like, I don't know, write something cool and we'll play along. I'm like, okay, I'll take the role. So with Jon of Mars, it is more of that forefront where like I can do all the composing as far as song structure and lyrics and things like that. But then like I'll approach a bassist and be like, hey, what do you think of this? You want to play over? You're totally welcome. Take this, play something and send it back to me, And it's kind of the same way with everybody else where it's like, I will take feedback. I'm not opposed. If somebody's like, hey, this 8-minute song might be a little too long. Can we cut it down a bit? Yeah. What do you want to cut out? Like what I throw out there is just a bass. The way I look at it is like, if I have just assembled the canvas and maybe picked out some colors, people are going to help me decide what I'm painting still.
For sure. Yeah, I like how you put that. Man, I almost feel like I should just cut the interview right here. That's a good one. Really well thought. That's a different way of putting it too. Okay, so I guess what I really want to know just personally about you is like, where do you see yourself? I don't want to say fitting in, okay? Because I don't think you should fit in. I don't think anybody should fit in. Everybody, and meaning I think everybody should take their own piece of the puzzle, but they don't have to plug it into the other pieces of the puzzle. I think, again, it goes back to the idea that if you put your thing out there, your audience finds you. But that doesn't necessarily mean we're all interconnected. I mean, yes, yeah, human experience, all that crap. I get it. But I mean, what is it that sets you apart? Why, why should we listen to you? I know why I'm listening to you because I like you literally as a person and I like your music. But, how are you going to set yourself apart for future generations, or do you even care?
I mean, I do care to some degree, right? Mm-hmm. It's not healthy to care what people think about you all the time.
Sure.
But there is a degree of like, what are people younger than me going to take away from this? And here's what I want people to take away. And here's where I think I fit in. I think that it is okay to be expressive, and it is okay to be unsure, and it is okay to enjoy every aspect of the human experience that you can experience. But at some point, there is a point where you should connect with other people or look at yourself introspectively. So I think I fit in with like weirdos.
Sure.
Like, I don't know how, I think I'm weird. I think other people think I'm weird. Maybe people think I'm genuine.
I think everybody's weird, dude. Everybody's weird.
That's my thing. So, like, I'm here for people who like good music. I'm here for people who like complicated music. I'm here for people who like simple music. I'm here for everybody. So I kind of like, I wouldn't say I fit in. Like you said, you shouldn't fit in. And I definitely don't. I never have. Yeah. I would put myself in the same kind of bracket of people as like, not to get biblical, but like Jesus or Gandhi or anybody who's just like, I want to talk and hang out with people. Steve-O, Joe Rogan, whatever, name a person. It's in that same realm of just like, I enjoy people. I enjoy other perspectives. I'm not necessarily too concerned with like my own. I want to take in and understand because there's so much to life. There's just cool shit everywhere.
Yeah,
that's where I'm at. There is cool shit everywhere, and I am where the cool shit is.
Well, not to get religious, but I think hanging out with Jesus is pretty badass, personally. I do. I mean, I just think. I guess what I'm trying to say is if you can be so important to the world that a calendar and that that virtually almost everything in the world is built around your existence, that's pretty rad. You know what I mean? And so I understand why a lot of people don't want to necessarily follow the religious aspects of it, but his existence really mattered to the world. And it's profoundly affected so many people in a positive way, regardless of how many of Christian followers have harmed the world with their perspective. But again, it's a human existence, right? I mean, we're weird. We're all freaking weird. We're always upsetting the balance of what's right and pure because we're viruses.
Yeah, that's the whole point of the album. That's it. What are we? Who fucking knows? I don't know. Yeah. I've always felt like an alien. Here's the point of Jon of Mars. I am Jon of Mars because I feel like I'm from Mars. I've never felt like I'm normal. I've never felt like I fit in. I've never felt like I can truly relate to other people because no one has ever experienced the same way that I think.
Embrace the weird, dude.
Yep. That's where I'm at. Absolutely. I surround myself with weirdos confidently.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm so happy that we're chatting today because you're clearly weird and I'm clearly weird, or we wouldn't be having this sort of get together right now. So it's all good. I'm sorry. And by the way, I'm sorry for coughing my way through everything today. I really feel bad about it, but I wanted to make sure we connected and getting to you in a timely manner before the album comes out. So I guess the last question I would ask, because I have a feeling you and I could talk all day, would be, with the new record coming out, I don't want to say, how do you see your future? I think that's an impossible thing, but what do you want to happen with this album? Are you looking to build your audience? I mean, the obvious question here, but what do you care the most about this release coming? What is the most important aspect of it?
Outreach. It's definitely not money. I'm not going to make shit probably, and that's okay with me. Like, the whole goal with this was just like to put it out there, gain an audience, definitely just connect, because like you understand, you'll never ever find your audience if you don't try to put it out there. So this is really like, it's the first album I've ever put out. It's a test run, I guess, in a way too, to see everything you got to do to put out an album, and to build your audience and to growth. Yes, to growth.
Here's to growth. We're chiming our beer steins together. Wait a minute, I'm on the wrong side. We gotta go like that. You gotta do it. Yeah. There you go. Boom, boom, boom. Look at it happen. People listening to this are like,
imagine we're playing charades. That's all.
Yeah, that's right. And we've got the mirror thing going on, so we're totally taking the wrong side.
Very in sync.
No, dude, I really like you. I like the record, what I've heard of it. I'm really excited to see what happens for you, and I like the purity. I like the purity of your perspective. It's really refreshing, and especially for a young person. And I mean this kindly, and not, I'm not knocking you for being young. I think it's amazing because, in this world of TikTok and this desire to be seen and heard, and the 15-minute thing, and or in the case of TikTok, the 15-second thing,
10-second, yeah.
Yeah, it's so refreshing to talk to somebody who actually cares about the process of artistry versus the idea of celebrity. And so, I mean, I implore listeners to go out and find this new Jon of Mars record when it comes out, and to just dig into the guy behind it, because he's pretty freaking rad.
Thank you, Rob. I really appreciate that. That actually means a lot. I'm really bad at taking compliments, but that, I appreciate the time that you've given me. This has been a really fun experience, and you are weird like me, and I definitely could talk to you all day, probably about a million different things. So I appreciate this time a lot, and I appreciate everybody out there who's listening. If you do go check out the record, remember it was made with love from me to you.
You're